Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Healey, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Principals Association. I want to thank you once again for joining our Thursday Thought webinars. We've been doing this for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And so the nature of today is to continue to talk about continuity of education. I didn't know when I did this that we were going to get some more information about that just yesterday afternoon. So what I want to do is go over a few updates that happened since last Thursday to kind of bring you up to date. Hopefully you know about these issues, but if not, and if you want some more detail, again, put your questions in the chat room. We'll be taking questions at the end. And again, your best source for information is the PA Principals website under News and Announcements. We continue to update information that we're getting from PDE, as well as the information that we share from the ed organizations together on the FAQs that we update those. So please, you should visit that daily. We're continuing to update those as well. All right, so we're going to share our screen. Okay, can you go ahead? So hopefully, Missy, can you see this screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first thing, and if you're on the call, if you could just mute yourself, please. We're getting some feedback, except for our panelists. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is some guidance just came out from PDE about teacher and principal evaluations for the 1920 school year. And here are just some snippets of that. As you probably saw, they still must be completed this year. And that date is June 30th. So all teacher and principal evaluations to be completed by June 30th. And I will say, as you probably know, as far as when Act 13 was passed several weeks ago, that did eliminate, you know, the performance data, building level data, teacher specific, and SLO. So now for the teacher evaluations, it's 100% on the classroom observation, which, as you probably know, is Danielson for most of you, unless you have an alternate approved system from PDE. The indicators have changed, though, so it's now 30% for those on-stage indicators and 20% each for planning and professional responsibilities. And for the non-teaching professionals, it's 25% each. So just be aware of that it's now 100% to complete those evaluations. For principal evaluations, it's now 100% on the framework for leadership. And you know that there are 4 categories for each of those. They'll each be worth 25% of the overall evaluation. Now, in order to complete those evaluations, what you want to do is to obtain the 3 new forms that are on the PDE website under COVID-19. As you know, when you complete, let's just say the 82-1, it populates that and it drops in your building level score. All of those will be done, will be taken out of that form right now, and 100% will be based on the framework for leadership and the Danielson. So you need to obtain those forms to make sure that you're completing them properly. So again, that's the 82-1, the 82-2, and the 82-3 forms under the PD website under COVID-19. Again, I already mentioned Act 13. And then also want to mention, I'm expecting a little bit more guidance on this. It's a local decision on how you conduct your observations. So for example, I think we were out like March 13th, I think was the date that we were out. So what happens to those people that you didn't finish those observations in April and May, which a lot of us as principals usually spend a lot of time in those months completing those evaluations. So the question has been raised, how do we complete those observations right now? That is basically a local decision. PDE did not specify any guidance. So could you do a virtual observation now that we're going to be going to more live instructions? That's a possibility. I would certainly recommend that this is a discussion you need to have as your administrative team and with the collective bargaining unit as well, so that everybody has a shared understanding on how those evaluations will be completed by the end of the year. So just be aware of that. That part is a local decision. The rest of it, as far as the framework and the guidance on what's going to count, was issued guidance by PDE. And again, if you have some more questions about that or concerns that I need to be aware of to raise with PDE, please put those in the chat room for us. Okay, next slide, please. So several weeks ago, I used this graphic to talk about continuity of education. And at that time, 4 or 5 weeks ago, there were 3 pathways to that. You could just stand by and do nothing right away and wait to see if we were going to go back in. But as you know, that certainly has changed. And then after that, you could do enrichment and review or planned instruction. As of late yesterday afternoon, as you know, the do nothing was taken off the table many weeks ago, but now enrichment and review is also a dead-end path. So what's left right now is planned instruction, which is formal teaching, new learning. That's how it's defined in the PDE guidelines. So I just want everybody to be aware of that. And here's what came out yesterday. Next slide, please. So from the Secretary of Education, and these are quotes from his thing yesterday, we must increase the intensity and focus of our efforts around instruction for all students at all grade levels. So what does that mean? As educators preparing students to continue on to post-secondary opportunities, the workforce, or transitioning to the next grade level, it is our responsibility and expectation that every school offer planned instruction at every grade level for all students. That's very, very important because that's a change from what we had before. You could either do review and enrichment or planned instruction. And I know a lot of schools were, for example, doing planned instruction at the high school level, but weren't doing new learning yet at sometimes the elementary and the middle level. That is no longer the case. The new guidance is all schools, all students, planned instruction. And then finally, this is important because, as you know, you needed to post your continuity of education plan on the district website, as well as submit it to PDE. So what happens with those plans? So here's the quote and the guidance of that. I know that many LEAs have already submitted their continuity of education plans that may not yet address the need for planned instruction at all grade levels. These plans are dynamic, and as you revise and strengthen them, you could submit your updates as it says there. So the expectation there, as you read into that quote, is that you will revise and update your continuity of education plans and resubmit those to the Department of Education, as well as post them on your website. So they want your recent version. Now, this is a big change and may cause a lot of angst for some schools and school districts right now. Now, I will say the one question that I posed to PDE yesterday after I received this information was, what is the drop dead date for schools to move to planned instruction? So I'm waiting for some more guidance and an answer to that question. So I don't have an exact date for you when that planned instruction for all schools, all students needs to be in place. Because I know people were gearing up at different times for that. Okay, so that's a major shift that everybody needs to be aware of. Okay, and again, if you have questions about that, put it in the chat room. Next slide. So, as I said, I didn't know when we were planning this webinar that, we were going to be talking about continuity of education. We were going to get some extra information yesterday. So we have a panel of principals today representing the elementary folks. Is Dr. Missy Patchke. She's on our board of directors as our NAESP representative as well. You'll also be hearing from the middle level, Mike Maley. He's also one of our board members. He's from Pottsville Area School District. And representing high school is Chris Santini from Central Cambria School District. And again, they'll be introducing themselves and telling you a little bit about their schools in just a moment. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about next week's webinar. Next slide. So I was thinking about this issue for a while right now, and I thought it would be good if next week's webinar, we actually focus on student transitions. So if you're interested, I'm looking for 2 elementary leaders. Now I call them leaders because, as you know, it could be a principal or assistant principal or a director of education or assistant superintendent. We have all of those members, right? You know, as far as our PA principal members. So I really would like some information on what are you doing about kindergarten registration? I know my wife is a principal of an all kindergarten academy. She's really worried about this issue. They were supposed to have kindergarten registration, and now what do they do to have those kids register, which some of that you could do online, but there's, as you know, there are things and all kinds of things that take place around kindergarten registration. Middle level, they have transition on both ends. They have transition of kids leaving the elementary and transitioning into their first grade level at the middle school, and also kids transitioning out of middle level into the high school. So looking for 2 principals to talk briefly about that. And then finally at the high school level, this has been an issue on many high school principals' minds. What about graduation? Parents' mind, the seniors. What are some graduation ideas that you have? So that'll be next week's topic. If you're interested in being a part of the panel, could you please email me directly at healey@paprincipals.org. And with that, we'll start talking about continuity of education. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Patchke. Missy?
Thank you, Paul. Yep. Thank you, Paul. My name is Missy Patchke. I'm an elementary principal in the Springford area school district, which is in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, Montgomery County. We have about 8,000 students in our district, and my school specifically is K through 4. I have about 470 students. We definitely have been ahead of this plight along the path. We actually transitioned to planned instruction under the direction of our superintendent and our curriculum department on March 30th. So we've walked this path for a little while, all the way down to kindergarten. And when asked to give you some information, my reflection that I'm going to share with you is on what's working and where are those struggles, what are the pros and cons. I can say just a shout out to my team. The Springford Area School District has done a fantastic job of trying to meet the needs of all kids. So as we think through what's been going on, you know, what's working? And I can tell you, I talked to staff, I talked to parents, and it's a struggle to come up with right now, what are all the good points? So here's what I came up with. Kids are safe. We're in a really trying time right now, but they're in their homes where they're loved and they're cared for. On the flip of that, we certainly know that there are children we worry about, and that's possibly part of the not working. We have flexible scheduling possibilities in the homes. There's increased opportunity for play. Distractions are minimized for some students that really struggle in a large classroom. We have social concerns are minimal right now. We also have opportunities for creativity and discovery-based learning. There's opportunity for choice with children, and this whole process really is going to encourage independence with kids. New technologies being used and explored, as well as some families are reporting very positive family engagement experiences. So what's the struggles? At the elementary level, a lot of our children are very highly motivated by the relationships with their teachers and with their peers. And so motivation is a struggle for some of our kids. Also, families are facing new times. Everybody's struggling with different needs. Some is financial, some is emotional and social. So it's just a whole new playground out there of challenges. Some children have little supervision at home or aren't being provided with a functional structure, so they could be missing out. Social engagement is sorely missed. We at the elementary level have such whole child philosophies, and we work so well of being into it, having that intuitive sense in master level classrooms of what children need, and now we're behind a screen. Technology doesn't always work. It's not always available. Screen time, prior to this situation, my core team, we talked about very highly concerned about the amount of screen time children were already having without the COVID crisis. And now it's our lifeline to them. So that's still a concern of how much they're on these screens. And then if we look at just children with special needs or learning differences or social emotional concerns, and how we're meeting those needs, or even just getting them through this to a time when we can do a better job at that. So what do we do for our kids? We need to be empathetic. We need to provide ways for them to connect with teachers, staff, peers. Our children are going to benefit from movement-based expectations, low-tech, hands-on activities, encouraging and supporting their parents to have schedules and routines, and also just to be flexible and be understanding that kids need to laugh. They need to find joy like they do every day when they walk into our schools and our classrooms. And we have to find ways to do that for them. For parents, we need to be empathetic and supportive and provide them opportunities to talk and just listen. Everybody has a different story, whether it's you have a very independent, gifted child that just wants more to do at all times. And then there's also the families that can't even get their own children on a computer, or they're having a struggle with sharing technology and the expectations feel too much. So prioritize relationships with our parents and prioritize building that school culture like you do when you're in the brick and mortar. For our teachers, they need us to be the leaders that they had in the brick and mortar, because we need to be visible to them, we need to be accessible, and we need to be visionary. They're depending on us to be that constant for them. So we need to give them priority and permission to be human. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to get through it together. And then finally, I would add, you need to take care of yourselves, principals. This is a time where we're giving people as it is, and your schools are going to be better if you're taking care of yourself.
Thank you so much, Missy. Really appreciate it. Well, I'm sure there's going to be some questions a little bit later, so we'll turn it over to Mike Maley. Mike?
Hello, everybody. Mike Maley here as I start sharing my screen as well. As Dr. Healey said, and Dr. Patchke, great job on that. I'm going to be redundant with some of the topics, but I got to say your district's very lucky to have you leading them through this crisis. So I'm the principal of the DHH Lingo Middle School here in Pottsville, PA. We are a 5 to 8 middle school. Approximately 750 students, give or take, each day it changes. We were designated an ATSI school this past school year, and we're also Title I. So this has been a little bit of a slippery slope as we go down this road. When we canceled the PSSA exams, that's some of the questions I'm going to have going forth is what does this mean for our plan, and how do we build that into our programming for next year? And, you know, looking ahead, how's that going to impact our students and our staff? But as we said, we're going to go through. So as Dr. Healey said, we already started review and enrichment procedures back on April the 1st for the Pottsville School District. We are a one-to-one school, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in my slides. And our staff was really prepared, very proud of the work they've been doing. But we saw this quote come out yesterday, and I have the link on there if anybody would need it, to Pedro's announcement that we have to go to planned instruction. We were talking about this. A lot of the parents were asking for it. Low participation was one of the cons that we had with the review and enrichment. 1 or 2 kids would log on for a Zoom session with the teacher, getting the materials, etc. So just to help refocus the teachers and the community, I started working on a new idea. When I sat down and thought about it at our first faculty meeting, let's see if I get my, there it goes. Let me go back here. When I looked at, we left the building on March the 13th, and until our students come back on August 31st, there's 170 days counting weekends in there. When I said that to my staff at our first staff meeting, they kind of refocused us. That's a long period of time to truly go without seeing our kids, talking to our students, educating them, and moving them in the right direction. This is something I'm going to start talking to my parents about as well, because one of the biggest cons that we started having was just the parent perception, social media, and how parents are reviewing the idea of teaching the kids at home that this isn't their job. But with that, we have designed a great program to help impact the students. So our thought was, how does planned instruction impact Pottsville area? What do we want our students to learn was one of the first questions we asked ourselves. How are we going to deliver this instruction, and how do we assess the learning? We wanted the desired approaches. So the backward approach is something we decided would be the best idea to look at. What knowledge do we want our students to leave with? What skills are essential to learning and promotion? As Dr. Healey said, I'm a middle school, so I'm looking at my accelerated students who normally would take the Keystone exam this year in 8th grade if they're on that track, and could possibly skip over freshman algebra or English 9, etc. So that's going to be a big problem for us as we look to see how we're going to evaluate students. How do we know if they truly made those skills, those gains to be promoted to that next grade level? Our official last day for Pottsville area is June the 1st. So we have a 6-week time frame starting this Monday when planned instruction will begin for the Pottsville area school district, and then continue until May the 29th. That's a shout out to my in-school suspension person, Mr. Chris Napolz, when he was a major league pitcher with the Montreal Expos. So delivery of instruction. We decided to go with an asynchronous program. This would provide our, as Missy said, the flexibility with our families to make sure that the parents are home. Students have the ability to move along the day, depending on how many materials or assignments they have. It also allows for that continuous education to occur. If a student needs to go back and review a lesson, it's going to be there through a YouTube clip or posted to their Google Classroom. They can go back and reflect on the delivery of the instruction, how the content was delivered, etc. As we just talked, our teachers and our students are very proficient in Google Classroom. Schoology is something we've used this year. I have a Google Classroom for the staff. All my departments have a Google Classroom, and then each teacher also has one for their individual classes. That's predominantly how we're going to deliver the instruction. We're also going to utilize the student email to deliver assessments and assignments as we go through the system. We also ask that our staff have designated office hours. I want 3 2-hour blocks during the week. They have been rotating them, which has been very nice. I didn't ask them to go beyond the school day, but many of our teachers are giving hours during the evening. We have a lot of essential employees here in Schuylkill County who are working in distribution centers, a lot of the gas employees, et cetera, as well. So with that, the idea of the 3 2-hour blocks, I would like the teachers just to work with the students during that time frame, and then allow the other days for parent communication through email and through other modes of communication. As we talked, and our third problem was going to be, how do we assess the learning? Looking at that, it's going to be weekly submissions, and that's how we're going to document attendance and that participation. Our third marking period, we are going to allow the students to make up some of the work that was missed that last week before the closure. We did ask that nobody receives a grade lower than 60% or what would equivalent to a D- in our grading scale. Then for the fourth marking period, we're going to do a pass-fail or a satisfactory, unsatisfactory. And we ask that the staff please continue to document in Skyward so that parents know what assignments are coming up, due dates, just trying to keep that communication between home and school alive and active. And then as we talked about, just some of the different pros and cons we went through. The ATSI school, this was actually a pro. We were heavily looking at our curriculum and aligning it to the state standards. So we knew when we talked about the essential skills for these next 6 weeks, the staff had a pretty good sense of where to go to find the materials, what templates to look at. As I mentioned before, we're a one-to-one school district, so our iPads and the high school iPads already go home with the students. We only had about 75 iPads that parents at first did not want to go home, so we had to devise a system to have those go out. I've been using S'more. It's something I found a couple years ago through some of the different conferences up at Lead 19 and Lead 20 that we had. Really found it to be a useful resource to keep parents and students on the same page and just communicate out there what we're doing. As I mentioned before, the Google and Schoology proficiency was there since we used it all year. One of the hardest things we go through is connectivity. About 70% of my building is free and reduced lunch in regard to the district as well. So Comcast does a great job with having an essential program that gives a low, I think it's $9 a month to families. They also opened up all their hotspots. We sent that map out to our students so they know what areas around Pottsville you can connect to the Wi-Fi. But one of the major issues we ran into is that some of our students live in an area that Comcast does not service, and they're not providing those same resources. So we're actually trying to get a grant to add Wi-Fi around the building that parents could come to park in the parking lot and still connect to the Wi-Fi. As I said before, the perception right now is one of the ones we're struggling with our parents, that they don't want to teach the students at home, that they feel it's our job. They're struggling with the connectivity and the online format. But I think as we go through this and we keep communicating with them and creating a solid plan, that we're going to have some great success with that. If you have any questions, as we said, thank you for your time. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Dr. Healey at this point.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Really appreciate your thoughts on that at the middle level. Next up for our high school is Chris. I want to give a shout out to Chris in his part of the region. He's been having us come out to talk to his principals over the last 5 years, and he's organized for that. So, Chris, thank you so much for giving us that opportunity to meet with your principals on a yearly basis out in your region. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel. So I'm principal at Central Cambria High School. We're located right between Altoona and Johnstown, about an hour west of State College and an hour and 15 minutes east of Pittsburgh, up here in the Laurel Highlands. We have about 550 students in our high school, 9 through 12. And then we have the middle school, which is attached, and that has about 400 students in grades 6 through 8. So when we developed our continuity of education plan, the middle school principal and I collaborated on that so that we were, doing a lot of the same things, following the same schedule. We do have some shared staff, so that was important for us to be on the same page. So we began with planned instruction from the get-go. We started that on April 1st. We had 2 virtual in-service days on March 30th, March 31st, to get our teachers up to speed with using Zoom. A lot of them had already used Google Classroom, but a few of them had not. So we got them up and running with that. And then with some other tools to produce content for this format, like Edpuzzle, Flipgrid, some other things that, we had trained pockets of our staff on, but not every single person. So, that was kind of our approach. We were anticipating that the closure was going to be extended longer than that initial period that was announced. So we didn't really want to, put work into one plan and then a few weeks later have to put work into a separate plan. So we just went all in right from the get-go. And our motto, our mission here is that Teddy Roosevelt quote, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." Because our kids, there's a wide range of what they have at home. Our teachers, it's a wide range of, their capability with technology and their own challenges at home. The one thing I've learned in those couple weeks that we were closed is that it's hard to manage a full-time job from home with your own children. I've got a kindergartner and a second grader, so I'm updating my LinkedIn to cyber school principal and homeschool teacher after this ordeal's over, because to me, that's the toughest part, is just that balance between our duties to our students and our duties to our own kids at home. So it really helped my teachers that I had to get some experience with that before we created our plan, because that opened my eyes to let's have some realistic expectations for what we can do. So I'll share my screen here real quick just to show some of the information that we're using. So we set up a schedule basically to manage, our day-to-day situation. So we have synchronous classes that take place 3 days a week. Each subject area has a synchronous class 1 day per week. So on Mondays, there's no synchronous class meetings. We're doing a combination, asynchronous and synchronous. But we have virtual office hours every day via Zoom. Tuesdays, we have all of our elective courses have actual Zoom classes. Wednesdays is language arts, social studies, and foreign language. And then Thursday, today is math and science. And our purpose with those Zoom class meetings, I really am not focused on content that's being covered there. My focus is on, let's give these kids a way to remain engaged with their classmates, with their teachers, and with the school. And I'm going to tell you what, I've been popping into those Zoom classes the first couple weeks here. The attendance is unbelievable. We probably have over 90% of our kids in every level of course that we offer that are logging into Zoom. Again, I think it's just because they're stuck in quarantine, at home, and they're craving that interaction. So that's been a great thing to see. And if our teachers actually get through any content in these Zoom classes, that's icing on the cake. We originally set this up so that new content was going out at scheduled times. So some subjects was Monday and Wednesday, others was Tuesday and Thursday. The feedback that we're getting is that the kids would just like everything to be put out on Monday. Our deadline, weekly is turn the work in by Friday at 3 o'clock. And that's kind of how we're tracking attendance, is if they submit the work. So if the work's submitted, you were in attendance for that week. And if it's not, we're following up. So we changed our bell schedule a little bit, just, for the purpose of our remote classes. We shrunk that down a little bit. So this was all shared with parents and with the students. And then we put together a document, just kind of what's expected from our teachers. We put all the links for everything into one document to make it easy for them to find. So we set up a spreadsheet where they entered all their Google Classroom join codes so that, the administrators could get in there. That also helps us, if a student's having trouble logging in, we can help them get in. We have a list of students without internet access. Now, this was, an initial challenge. Our social worker has worked with all of those families, and right now we're at 100% of our high school kids are connected to the internet in some form, which in our area is pretty phenomenal. I do have to give a shout out to Atlantic Broadband, Comcast, for offering the 2 free months. We have a couple kids who have opted to have, hard copy paper assignments. And so we deliver those home weekly on Thursdays. We're using our busing contractor to deliver, food for the weekend, as well as some of that schoolwork. And some of our paraprofessionals are assisting with that. So this is just a document that has all of those things we're asking our teachers to do, all in one location. So, again, and that's the quote, do what you can with what you have where you are. We're not expecting everybody to knock this out of the park on day one. We know that our families have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of folks, like everywhere else, a lot of people are getting laid off, and they have their own struggles at home. And we don't want to be a cause of stress. So this whole marking period, it's basically voluntary, on the part of the kid, because we're going pass fail. So teachers are entering grades in Skyward like they would at any time. But if the kid gets above a 70, it's a pass for the marking period. And if they don't, it really doesn't matter, because we're calculating grades and GPA and class rank off the first 3 marking periods. To try to provide some motivation for kids to stay engaged, we have given teachers the latitude to adjust their final average upward. If the kids are continuing to do the work, log into Zoom classes, and the teacher feels that they deserve a bump. That's especially important for our seniors. As any of you who've worked at the high school level know, you always have a handful that you're trying to push across that stage. So we're going to, give our teachers the latitude to reward hard work, this market period. So those are some of the things, just challenges for us, keeping kids connected. So what we're doing there is we're actually calling kids. We gave our teachers, we want them, calling a certain number of kids a day. And then our guidance counselors, our administrators, we're making calls home. So we've gotten through almost every kid in the first week and a half. And we're going to try to cycle through every 2 weeks where we've contacted every family, just because I think that's important to maintain that communication. As a leader, the communication thing's a challenge. So we've chosen to over communicate. So I'm putting more stuff out through Skylert. Not as many calls because people get a little fired up if you're calling too often. But we put a lot of emails out. We're putting a lot of things on our social media page. We stole an idea from Ralph Ceceres, the principal at Portage Junior Senior High School. We're putting a daily Pledge of Allegiance out on our YouTube channel, our social media. We're actually having, we're having guests submit videos. So we have alumni doing it. We have kids that are in the military. We have kindergartners. We have everything in between. And that's gotten a lot of positive publicity, on social media. I post a daily schedule out there on social media every day. I just, use the notes feature on my phone, take a screenshot of it, put it up there just as a reminder. And then we're sending things out to the kids via email and Google Classroom and all those channels. So really for us, it's gone really well so far. The one thing that I would recommend, with our schedule where we were trying to push things out on different days, it helps kids stay organized if everything's out there at one time. So kind of like in a checklist form, all in one document that you post to Google Classroom that includes the links to anything that they need, and they just kind of work from top to bottom. So we're going to be moving in that direction here over the next week or two. What we were finding is there were links posted all over the place in Classroom, and kids were being a little confused as to where to go. So I've experienced that with my own too. We're using Seesaw grades K-2 as our hub for our learning platform. So that's what my own kids are on. But then their electives, their specials are through Google Classroom. So I've seen it from the parent side with two of my own kids. And then I'm seeing it, obviously from our side of it, trying to push it out. So we're going to put a survey out to our students and our parents this Friday just to get some feedback, see how they're feeling about what we're doing. And then, the other thing is, for anyone who's not yet started the planned instruction piece, just keep your teachers in mind. I mean, a lot of them are teaching from home with kids on their lap, little ones at home that are hard to manage, so you got to try to pare down some of the nuisance work that comes with the job. We really pared our lesson plan down to almost nothing, essential questions, and that's about it. And, just trying to manage the workload for the staff. And then again, too, with them, our message to them was make the workload for the kids manageable too, because you can't expect them to do the same amount of work from home that they were doing in your classroom. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of patience, a lot of being able to admit that something's not perfect and being willing to adjust and fix. We're building the plane as we fly it, and you just want to keep it, off the runway. So that's what we're doing. So far, so good. I'll just say one last thing regarding graduation, because I know that's next week's topic, and I know for high school people, graduation prom, that's a big deal. I'll just say in our area, there's kind of two trains of thought. Some folks are going to go ahead with something at their regularly scheduled graduation date, and other folks are pushing things back in the hopes of being able to have, the more formal ceremony. We put a survey out to our seniors and parents of our seniors, and then I met with my senior class officers on Tuesday. Their preference was to set a date in June and July and August for those events. So basically, if we can't do the one in June, which I can almost guarantee we're not going to do that, we would then fall back to July. And if that doesn't work, we would go to the August date. And we set those on Saturdays in case people are on vacations or need to come back from somewhere else. So that's what we're doing. Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, but we're going to do graduation in the morning and then have prom that night if we're able to do that. So that's the plan. But again, all kinds of things being considered. We have a drive-in movie theater that I know several districts are looking at potentially doing something like that. Maybe a drive-by where you set a stage up, the people drive up in their car, kid gets out, gets their diploma, parents take their picture. And then obviously there's a lot of virtual options. So I just, be creative. That's all I can say is be creative, be open to ideas, talk to your kids. I think one of the things that's helped us is, we involve our students in making some of these decisions. And when I put the letter out to the parents the other day with those dates, I listed that in there, that this was the preference from the survey and from those class officers. So it's not all me, it's a group decision. And that's the direction we're going. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So for people on the webinar today, you can see there's a whole host of a lot of creative ideas at every single level that people are coming together to solve and reaching out to stakeholders as well. So before we get questions, I do want to circle back and reference to planned instruction, because we've gotten this question since yesterday. So first, the difference between review and enrichment that was previous was exactly that, review of previous learning, where planned instruction was new learning. And the question we're getting, well, what if we don't have internet connection? And what if kids don't have computers and things? That cannot be a barrier for you. We have to overcome that barrier. So for example, if you, and I think Mike has mentioned this, was very creative using their school bus contractors to deliver meals and packets. So if you were doing, for example, review and enrichment by packets, you'd have to kind of turn that into planned instruction by packets as well. Now, is it harder to do that without the internet, to do a live lesson and then kids have office hours? Absolutely. So we got to think of hotspots, things like that. The other question I got yesterday, well, what about the grant that some of you applied for that closed last week? It was open from April 1st to April 6th. When are they going to award that $5 million, which had to do with computers, hotspots, instructional materials? I don't have an answer yet for you on that one at this point in time, but we're trying to get that answer as well. So before we go to questions, can we just circle back? If you're willing to have people contact you directly about anything you said, can you tell us what your email is, and then maybe even write it in the chat room so people can see it? So we'll start with Missy.
Sure. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, my email is mpats@spring-4.net, and I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you. And Mike?
Same thing. Thank you to everybody. And if I was too fast, or you need to go back and reflect on my asynchronous presentation from this meeting, that's fantastic. I just posted my email address in the link. Best of wishes to everybody and good luck going through with this. As we said, our theme this year was Your Story Starts Here, and we have been rewriting every single chapter every single day. And my last message to parents was that I'm very happy we're writing this together, because again, we're trying to get that community involvement and cohesiveness between school and home. So best of luck. Please reach out with any questions. We are all begging, borrowing, and stealing at this point. A lot of great ideas. Chris, fantastic job. Some of the stuff you're doing. I'm going to steal your idea of one link posting going out every day in the schedule. I do appreciate that. So best wishes to everybody.
And Chris, your email?
Yeah, I put email and phone number in the chat. Email address is csantini@sendcam.org. Phone number is 814-472-8860, extension 2001. That'll dial right to my cell phone. So feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email. I'm willing to share anything that we've come up with. Might save you some time. Take it, steal it, adapt it to your own situation. That's what we do as principals. We take other stuff and adapt it to our setting, and willing to share anything that you guys need.
Great, thank you. And again, for anybody that's on the webinar, even after this is over and you don't have their information anymore, just send me an email. I can get you in touch with them as well. So let's go to some of the questions here. I can't see them, so I'm relying on Steph. We're practicing social distancing as well. She's on the other side of the room, so she'll read the question, and whether it's me or anybody else on the panel can answer those. So Steph?
Do districts have the option to use last year's observation scores for the 2019-20 school year for observations that were not completed by the March 13th school closure?
Okay, so I will take that one. Hopefully you heard the question, do they use last year's scores? Well, you can't use last year's scores, remember, if you're talking about the SPP and things like that, because as a part of Act 13, they're saying no longer are we using that the observations for 1920 now are based on 100%. What I don't know about, and this is also an interesting question, so let's say you did an earlier observation. Let's say you did one in January or February, right? And you used other things for that observation. Now, you probably didn't complete it though, the final evaluation. So, but let's say you had temporary people and you use some different things. What do you use now for the ones that are already being completed? So that's a question we still have yet to be answered at this point. Okay.
Will PDE give guidance about when to close out the school year?
No, PDE already gave guidance on about when to close the school year. Remember, the 180 days is gone. The hours, instructional hours, are gone at this point. That was a part of Act 13. So the answer to that question is that's a local decision. So if your date was going to be June 5th, it's up to your superintendent administrative team with the board to say, we're going to keep going till June 5th or end earlier. Because the 180 days is gone instructional, then it's a local decision for that. And I think probably all of our panel members have different days that you're ending. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, what you're doing, if you're sticking to your calendar or not.
We're just sticking to our calendar at this point. Our official last day was June the 1st, and at this point, that's still tentatively the last day of school.
Yeah, we're the same, Paul. We're sticking to the original calendar.
We added 1 week. We were supposed to get out late May. I had scheduled graduation for June 5th because we always have 7 to 8 snow days here. This year, I think we had 1. So we had been back to that May last day of school, but we're planning to add a week to the end just to kind of have time to wrap everything up.
Right. And on our previous webinar, I'll just say this again, that I had calculated out one time that even if we were going to go back, you could go until June 30th, right? So we would have to go back somewhere in late April. There would still be time if you went all the way to June 30th to get the 180 days in. Now that's off the table, as this, so it really doesn't matter about days. What's really important is how much learning do the students need? And as you all were talking about, what do they need to be successful no matter where they're transitioning for next year, to another grade, to the workforce, to college? And that's something that has to be a local decision.
Any changes to the budget or grant submission process for this year?
So I'm not sure what that question means. If you're talking about the state budget, I will comment just briefly on that everything's up in the air on the state budget right now. The governor did propose some increases in basic education funding. That is suspect right now. We don't know. It could be level funding for next year because of what's happening with COVID-19 and the cost associated with all of that. So stay tuned for the state budget. As far as the grant, if you're talking about the grant, I've already specified in a previous comment, I don't know when that $5 million will be awarded for those people that submitted grants that looked at kids that, needed devices and things like that.
There is a request for your update PowerPoint, especially related to the SLOs. If you can, I guess, submit that or send that out to them.
Yeah, so if you're talking about my PowerPoint that I shared, we'll provide a link for that on our website in addition to a link for the webinar as well.
Has anybody thought about the beginning of next year to help review and ensure a knowledge base to move on to next grade?
Anybody want to take that one?
We actually started looking. I talked to my Schuylkill Achieve, the after-school program coordinator. They're still working with the IU that there's monies available. Again, everything will be predicated on the fact if we are able to enter the building and social distancing's off. But we talked about a summer school enrichment type program where it would be free to kids to come in and just, again, get caught up on what we missed this year, some of the newer terms for the year coming up. It's something we started talking to our lead teachers about, of what August and September is going to look like this coming school year.
Anyone else explore that?
Yeah, we haven't had those discussions yet, but that thought kind of came to me last night, actually, when we were meeting with all of our spring coaches, just about, we're going to have to get our people together by department PLC and have a discussion about where everybody kind of ended up at the end of this remote learning process, content wise, just to see, because obviously you're not getting through everything in Algebra 1 that you would have gotten through previously. So we're gonna have to start Algebra 2 in a little different spot and have those teachers, probably with either some additional review time to ramp up the year, which I hate to use that word, but it almost has to be done, or just simply starting the content of their course at a different level than what they are used to.
Yeah, I would also add to that for our elementary students on a social emotional level, in addition to understanding where each student is academically, we definitely are brainstorming ideas of how to put closure to these classrooms from this year for the students that are still in our building. One of my sister schools, one of their meetings they came up with, some schools do a step-up process like in the spring to meet their next teacher. They were thinking about a step back. So for a few hours on a school day to have some kind of morning meeting format or closure activity with children with the previous year's teacher.
Okay, anything else in the queue?
Nope, that's it.
So I want to take this opportunity to thank our three panelists today. Thank you so much. That was great advice. Some great tips for all of us to take back and to digest a little bit. And I hope our people that are on the webinar will reach out to you if they have further information as well. I want to remind everyone next week on Thursday at the same time at 11:30. That's our standard time. We'll talk about student transitions a little bit more in depth. Kindergarten registration, middle level, incoming and outgoing. And as Chris mentioned, some ideas right now in reference to graduation and those other ceremonies that typically happen at the end of the year, especially for seniors. And then personally, on behalf of our board of directors, I want to thank all of our school leaders who have really stepped up during COVID-19 and what you do on a regular basis, but certainly everyone is turning to you as a leader today. The students need you, the staff needs you, the district needs you, and the parents need you. And I know that you're spending countless hours trying to build this plane while we're flying right now. And it certainly shows by the creativity and the innovation on the part of the teams that have been really working together. So continue that great work. And as I always say, stay safe and stay healthy. And thanks for joining us, and we'll hope to see you next week again. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.